The title of this video is The Typology of the Church as the Bride of Christ. But what is typology? The purpose of typology is to bring to light the unity of God's plan found in the Scriptures. It shows forth the mystery, that is, that by which we can link together the facts found in the Scriptures, God's purpose, and His work in carrying it out. The term typology comes from the Greek term typdo, which refers to the dye or mould used to imprint an image. Typology helps us to recognize the shadows in the Old Testament, which point towards the images in the New Testament, the realities of which will be complete in a mysterious way at the Parousia. There is symbolism of the relationship between God and Israel as bridegroom and bride in the Song of Songs, though this is not immediately obvious, as it is never explicitly referred to, but merely alluded to. For instance, "Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm," symbolizes God's covenant with Israel. These images of bridegroom and bride can be viewed in the light of the New Testament, where Christ is the bridegroom and His church is the bride. In the New Covenant, Christ created a new people of God, which is the church. Israel was therefore the sign of the future gathering of all nations, a type of the church. And it could even be said that it is an appearance of the church, in that the 12 apostles, the foundation stones of the church, represent the 12 tribes of Israel. The bride in the Song of Songs is also a type of the church, and the bridegroom in turn is a type of Christ, which was made clearer in the Gospel when Christ likened Himself to a bridegroom. John the Baptist also likened Christ to a bridegroom. The bridegroom and bride metaphor can be also found in the book of Hosea, the first few chapters of which tell the story of how God commanded Hosea to "Go, take to yourself a wife of harlotry, and have children of harlotry." Hosea then goes and marries Gomer the prostitute, who thereafter is repeatedly unfaithful to him. God made it clear to Hosea from the start why He was issuing such commands by saying, "The land commits great harlotry by forsaking the Lord." It was clear, therefore, both to Hosea and to the reader, that the relationship between Hosea and Gomer symbolized that between God and Israel. God was communicating to His people through Hosea's marriage, and this is typical, since God speaks His word through the prophet's life more than simply through his mouth. There is a theory that Gomer was a pagan temple prostitute who took part in fertility rites at Canaanite temples, and this would symbolize the Israelites' idolatry. The prophets likened Israel's idolatry to prostitution a number of times in the Old Testament. Indeed, there is a connection between prostitution and idolatry, in that prostitution degrades the body just as idolatry degrades the soul. Gomer represents each member of the church who is unfaithful to Christ. The names which God commands Hosea to call his children represent the effects of Gomer's unfaithfulness. The first signifying that God will leave Israel to a disastrous fate. The second that God's unforgiveness of Israel is due to their own unrepentance. And the third that God and Israel no longer belong to one another because of Israel's sins. By spelling out the effects of Israel's unfaithfulness to God, the names of Gomer's children also spell out to us the effects which our own unfaithfulness to Christ has on our souls. Hosea responded to Gomer's unfaithfulness by winning her back to him by his love and mercy. "Therefore, behold, I will allure her, and bring her into the wilderness, and speak tenderly to her." This signifies that when Israel converts back to God, it is really God who takes the initiative. Here, Hosea is a figure of Christ, who came not to call the righteous, but sinners. The message of the book of Hosea is that God's love, mercy, and faithfulness is unending. Of course, Gomer had to respond to Hosea, and Israel to God, just as we must respond to the call of Christ. Holiness is measured according to the great mystery in which the bride responds with the gift of love to the gift of the bridegroom. This spousal love of God for Israel in Hosea and in the Song of Songs is a shadow which prefigures Christ's love for each individual soul. Christ sanctifies us through the sacraments. The liturgy of the sacraments often makes use of texts from the Song of Songs to symbolize the beauty of the soul transformed by sacramental grace. The Christian soul bears the likeness of Christ through the action of grace in the sacraments. Furthermore, all the baptized can call themselves spiritually brides of Christ, and this spousal union will be made complete when they reach heaven, which Christ likened to a wedding banquet. Even those who have earthly marriages in this world will be espoused to God in the next, where they neither marry nor are given in marriage. However, since woman is able to represent it in her very nature, tradition has applied only to the baptized woman that which is said of the Church, that she is a bride of Christ. So when a woman then consecrates herself to him, she can be even more truly called a bride of Christ. She thereby becomes an image of the Church, in that she participates in the very reality of the spousal union between Christ and the Church. The love of God for Israel in Hosea foreshadows Christ's love for the Church and each individual member thereof. The impetus for his desire to sanctify her. The Church's structure is totally ordered to the holiness of Christ's members. Just as Hosea gave back to Gomer her dignity by his unmerited love and mercy, Christ sanctifies his bride the Church, who is full of sinful members. Christ loved the Church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. The reality of the bridegroom and bride will be made perfect at the Parousia, a union which is mysteriously depicted in the book of Revelations. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. This union, the culmination of all creation, was foreshadowed in the beginning. God formed Eve from Adam's side while he was in deep sleep, and this prefigures the formation of the Church, which was represented by the gushing forth of blood and water from Christ's side as he hung dead on the cross. Eve is thus a type of the Church, and Adam a type of Christ. And so the Old Testament symbol of God and Israel as bridegroom and bride, prefiguring Christ and the Church, and pointing towards each soul's spousal union with God in heaven, as well as the union which will be perfected between Christ and the Church at the Parousia, which was foreshadowed in the beginning, demonstrates how typology helps us to understand the deeper meaning of the Scriptures, what the Scriptures are teaching us about ourselves, about God and his relationship with us, about the meaning of Christ's coming and what he has done for us, and thereby to see the overarching plan of God, from creation to the Parousia.